Pinoli Cole Pinot Noir. So Pinoli Cole Pinot Noir is one of our projects, one of our own labels. So this is a label we created and a brand that we created back in 2014 vintage. And it represents our partnership between a single vineyard property up in the Anderson Valley, Mendocino, and I'll talk about that region here in a sec. Between a single vineyard property in Anderson Valley, a winemaker by the name of Alex Crangle, and Quigley Fine Wines. And so I'll start with the area because it speaks a lot about the name of the wine, the style of the wine, and what kind of makes this, to me, this project really special and unique. So Anderson Valley is an east to west running valley up in Northern California. It's by driving about almost 3 hours north of San Francisco. It always takes a lot longer than you think. You look at a map, you think you're going to get there in 2 hours, and it's always closer to 3. Mendocino County. So you go north from San Francisco all the way through Marin County, and you get into Sonoma County, and you go all the way north to the end of Sonoma County, and then you enter into Mendocino County, and you head a little bit west over a mountain range. The Dramamine Highway is what some people call this little highway from the 101 into the Anderson Valley over this mountain range with about 100 switchbacks, hence the name Dramamine Highway. And you are in the Anderson Valley. Anderson Valley was a region that was settled back in the, I want to say the 1840s, 1850s, right around when California became a state during the gold rush times. It was an area where they did think there was potentially some gold. So there were some miners who were part of the settlers, but a lot of the settlers were ranchers and farmers, very fertile valley, cooler climate than what you have in many of the inland growing regions of California. And it was settled by, I guess you would call them maybe the more adventuresome pioneers, people who were not afraid to get way off the grid and way off the map to settle a homestead and a farm and a ranch. And because of it, it became a very isolated community. Even now it's difficult to get to with this windy road. A lot of people just don't bother going. Wine trips and wine ventures, people tend to overlook Anderson Valley, even though the wines are spectacular up there. But you can imagine back in the 1850s and 1860s how difficult it was to get there. And because of it, this community developed where they actually created their own small language, a dialect, I guess is a better term for it. It's not an official language like English or Spanish or Italian, but it's a dialect. So similar to something like what they speak in Hawaii called Pidgin, or what they speak in Piedmont, to use an example like Ilio has talked about. Piedmont has a dialect that is slightly different than Italian, that is only spoken by the native people of Piedmont. And in this Anderson Valley dialect, they have somewhere around 200 or 300 words. There's actually an Anderson Valley dictionary. The name of this dialect is called Boontling, 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 named after the town of Boonville, which was the area that was settled first, the town of Boonville. I've always wondered if the expression out in the boonies has something to do with Boonville. Somebody might want to Google that and see. It would make perfect sense because the term out in the boonies means out in the middle of nowhere. And Boonville, especially in the 1850s, was out in the middle of nowhere. But they created this language. And I guess I was reading about it over the weekend. I've Googled it a dozen times or so. And I was reading, I always get a little tidbits and facts that I always find interesting. The reason they did it was they wanted to be able to communicate with each other when, quote, foreigners came into their valley. So people who didn't live there came into their valley. They wanted to be able to speak to each other in a language or dialect, certain words, certain expressions, certain, part of this dialect that other people wouldn't understand. And so they still, to this day, they don't speak it, but the people who live in this area are very proud of this sort of quirky part of history. And so they've protected the dialect, and they still have words that they use, mostly in the local owned businesses use these words. But as you go there, you can find some of the old timers that can tell you stories about it. And there's, like I said, about 200 or 300 words that are completely different than any word in the English language that is part of this dialect. So one of those terms is Pinoli Cole. Pinoli Cole means a gravelly soil. Much of this area underneath the first layer of dirt is a very a soil that's loaded with gravel, so small pebbles and rocks. And it comes from the Navarro River. The Navarro River runs through the Anderson Valley. It's what created the valley. The Navarro River goes from the east up like by Healdsburg, Sonoma, a little north of there, and runs out through Anderson Valley and all the way out to the coast. Navarro River spills out to the coast of Mendocino. And so this area created, this river created an area of a lot of river stones in the soil. And when you have that, it creates hang on, I gotta let somebody in. Okay. When you have that kind of soil, this pebbly, gravelly soil, it allows the water to drain really well from the soil, which grapevines love. So we named this wine Pinoli Cole. And the reason we did it is the vineyard that we're working with sits right on the banks of the Navarro River, and underneath the layer of topsoil, you have pebbly, gravelly soil. And so the owner of this vineyard and I discussed potential names for this wine. And we knew we wanted to go Boontling because it's such a weird thing. If you Google Boontling, by the way, it's a rabbit hole, and it's kind of fun. One of the things you'll find is an old Johnny Carson show. Maybe I'm dating myself. Many of you guys probably don't remember the Johnny Carson show. Some of you do. Johnny Carson was a late night TV host, and he had a guy on there, an old rancher. I mean, this guy looked like something out of the 1850s. And you can find it on YouTube. And he's speaking Boontling. And in classic Johnny Carson, sarcastic, dry wit, is trying to understand what this guy's saying, and he's saying words that are in Boontling. And this guy's got the miner's hat, big beard. He looks like a character out of an 1860s play or something. And so you find all these words. And so we knew we wanted to go with Boontling on our brand name. And we just came up with a whole bunch of different terms. And we settled on Pinoli Cole for gravelly soil. The name of the vineyard that we work with, and this wine is always a single vineyard wine, and it's from the Frattey Shams Vineyard. And Frattey Shams, as you can imagine, also a Boontling term. Frattey Sham is a grapevine. So instead of calling grapevines, they call them Frattey Shams. Who knows why? Again, this is a weird, quirky thing, but I think it adds a certain charm and a certain sort of eclectic weirdness to this region. And so it's perfect for our brand. And the name of the vineyard is Frattey Shams, also pulled from the Boontling dialect. There's a brewery up there, Anderson Valley Brewing Company, that names most of their beers that they do. They have really good beer. And you can visit it. It's in the town of Boonville. And most of their beers are named also using this dialect, this Boontling. So that's the story of the name of the vineyard and of our brand. Now, the partnership is with Ron Verdier. Ron Verdier is the owner of the Frattey Shams Vineyard. Frattey Shams Vineyard is a 1 acre property, maybe just a little bit over an acre. It's entirely planted to a single clone of Pinot Noir. It's called the Dijon clone 115. Clones are, they're important in every noble grape varietal, but perhaps not any more so than in Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is probably the variety that has the most attachment to clones. You'll see a lot of clonal information in Pinot Noir regions, whether it's Burgundy, Willamette Valley, Oregon, Russian River, Sonoma, Anderson Valley. You see a lot of the growers and the winemakers actually naming their clone along with the wine, because Pinot Noir is so specific, is so unique and such a good carrier of terroir that details like that might not be as impactful on the wine in some varietals, but with Pinot Noir, it's very impactful. So this is a very famous clone called the Dijon 115. As you can probably guess, it's from Dijon, France, which is a town in Burgundy. These clones were brought over into California, propagated and spread throughout California and Oregon. You see Dijon 115 in a lot of places. But most vineyards, single vineyards, one property, are planted with a variety of clones. This is one vineyard, organically grown grapes, single clone varietal Dijon 115. So it really gives you a very important sense of place, or terroir as the French call it. So that's why I love this project, because Pinot Noir is the grape that is most closely associated with terroir and terroir-driven wine. And then you have this single vineyard grown by one guy. It's a 1 acre property. So him and I think about 4 farm workers that he hires, some of them seasonally, some of them year round, tend to this vineyard. So there's a consistency in the irrigation, in the fertilization, the organic, the hand picking of the grapes when they're harvesting. And then you have the single clone. So there's a real sense of place and a real terroir style to this wine. And why this wine tastes different every year is because of the climate, the season, the growing season. You have a winemaker in Alex Crangle who's making the wine the same way every year. We are buying the same barrels with the same type of toast every year. Francois Ferrer usually is the cooperage we use for Burgundy. For this Pinot and for a lot of our Pinots. It's a pretty famous Burgundy cooperage. And so when you taste differences each year in the Pinoli Cole Pinot Noir, it's purely a reflection of that year's weather. From the spring to the summer to the fall, the weather patterns, the amount of moisture, the lack of moisture, the heat spike, the wind, everything that goes into it is what changes this wine from year to year. It's not the blend. It's not the winemaker. It's not the property. It's not clones. Those are all consistent and the same every year. That's why I love this wine. That's why I think Pinot Noir geeks really love this wine. And anybody who's a Pinot Noir fan tends to geek out on it. So that's a little background on the project, on the valley, Anderson Valley. Specific about Anderson Valley's climate, it's a cooler climate. It's actually quite close to the coast. The town of Boonville is about 20 miles east of the Pacific Ocean, right up the Navarro River Valley. And because it's so close and it's a valley, you get this pretty intense influence. This fog really channels in, this cool, moist air comes in almost throughout the year. You still get days that it's very, very warm, but then you can get days in the middle of summer, July or August, where the temperature never cracks 65, 66 degrees. So Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, some of the Alsatian varietals are pretty abundant in this region. You don't find much Syrah. You don't find much Cabernet. You don't find much Zinfandel. There are exceptions, of course, up on the ridges and on the hills and in some of the south-facing slopes. You can ripen some of these varietals that need a little more heat. But Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and the Alsatian, so the Alsatians being Riesling, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, Gewürztraminer, these are the grapes that tend to get grown in this area. And so this project every year can vary greatly in terms of the number of cases made. We've had years where this one single vineyard produced less than 2 tons. That is never a good year for the grower, not great for us either, because we contract out. It's an unusual contract. Usually with contracts on fruit, you're either paying by the ton or the property. This is sort of an agreement we've come to with him where it's a kind of a sliding scale. I won't get into the details, but when you have a very low yield, it actually hits the pocket of the grower more so than us, but we're flexible with him. If he needs a little bit more on his per ton price on a very small year, a 1.8 tons for the entire property year, we're willing to go there. This year, 2019, was a fantastic year. Abundant fruit and really high quality. In fact, I think this is one of the best vintages of Pinoli Cole that we've ever done. As I'm smelling, I can smell this wine from here. As I'm smelling it and tasting it, it's so classically Pinoli Cole. It's so classically Pinot Noir. I mean, there's just no way you would guess any other grape other than Pinot Noir upon smelling this. And it's very classic to the Anderson Valley. And in 2019, this single vineyard produced almost 4 tons. So our yield was almost doubled while the quality stayed really high. That happens when you have a perfect, what's called fruit set, meaning when in the springtime, when the flowers pop out and the bunches are getting fertilized, what will be the grape bunches are being fertilized. There's no wind, there's no heavy rain. It allows for the pollen to come out, pollinate the bunches, and create lots of healthy grape bunches. And that's what happened in 2018. It's organic. He does things intentionally to keep the yield down. On a year like this, where Mother Nature just was handing us a wonderful vintage, abundant fruit, and high quality, you could probably see somewhere around 6 tons per acre on a property like this. This is the highest I've seen at just under 4. So we were able to produce 225 cases on this vintage, which is the most we've ever been able to produce. So that's really nice. And what's even nicer is that the owner of the property, on a bountiful crop like this, we're his only customer. We buy every grape bunch that comes from this vineyard. We buy it every year. He changes his price for us and gives us a better price. And therefore, we change our price and pass that savings along to our customers. That, and also this year was the first year that Alex Crangle made the wine at a different location. He left Balo Vineyards. Balo Vineyards was the place where Alex was the head winemaker. That's the facility we used. He was the head winemaker at Balo. And so when he did this side project with us, we would use the fermentation tanks, the space in their cellar, and we'd bring in our own barrels and bottling. But we used their bottling line. This is the first year we did not bottle at Balo. Fly is driving me crazy. We bottled at a place called Lichen Estates, also a very small little boutique winery. I believe it's in Boonville proper, whereas Balo was in a little town called Philo. They're right next to each other. But the agreement we had with Lichen Vineyards was an even, I think, more fair agreement, a little less costly in terms of using their tanks and using their space. We basically rent out a little side spot of their winery cellar to produce the wine. And so again, lower prices for us. We passed this on. We had originally sold the very first vintages of Pinoli Cole at 48 per bottle. It went to 52 per bottle for a couple vintages. It's now down at 39. So if you have Pinot Noir fans out there, and maybe they are not like the real deep, kind of cork dorky Pinot Noir fans who have no problem spending 50, 60, 80, $100 a bottle, and maybe they're a little tighter on their wine budget, this is a chance to get them something really special. This dips it into where I think Pinot Noir, almost a threshold of quality Pinot Noir. I wouldn't be interested, frankly. I know this sounds wine snobby, but like a $30 Pinot Noir to me is kind of like meh. I know what it takes to produce great Pinot Noir. I know that it's not a cheap grape. It's not a grape you can cut corners on. And so at 39, that is on the lower price point for this type of wine, small production, organic grapes. But on the quality, it is wonderful. So we got a really good deal on this, and we passed it along, dropped our price by $13 per bottle. So about $156 off on every case. So a really, really good deal. Oh my God, this wine's so good. So I drank this twice over the weekend. On Saturday night, we grilled salmon, and that's my favorite pairing with this. You can do salmon in lots of different ways. I do it in all different types of ways. I did it with cedar plank and fresh herbs. We have herbs from our garden that are doing really well. So I did a mix of all different herbs. Sea salt. I buy these really good sea salts at fish place I go. It's called the Sea Farm or Salt Farm, California Salt Farm. And they do all these cool blends of different herbs and peppers and spices in their sea salt. So I do olive oil, sea salt, fresh herbs, lemon. And I grill it on cedar plank, and I like kind of load all the herbs with all the olive oil and the salts and the spices with the herbs onto the cedar plank, grill it that way. And this wine with that salmon was fantastic. And then I had it last night, hence why I had to open a fresh bottle. I usually open a bottle, do my tasting notes, and then pour what's left here on Monday morning, but drank most of it on Saturday night. And then last night I had it with some dark chocolate, some sea salt caramel dark chocolate, which was so good with this wine. So a lot of versatility. Duck would be really good. Pork. A lot of people do Pinot Noirs and pork because of the salty nature of pork's meat, and salty foods and Pinot Noirs really good. In fact, I think there's a festival every year in Oregon called the Pork and Pinot Festival, and it's all different pairings of different pork food products, anything from pulled pork to pork loin, you name it, with Pinot. So I love this with salmon. That's my favorite pairing, but it is versatile. It can go with just about anything. Oh, the nose is so pretty. Bright red cherry fruit, pomegranate, wild flowers. I don't know what kind of wild flowers, but it kind of reminds me of like when you have a bunch of wild flowers. It's not roses and it's not, violets. It's more like daisies, lilies. Oh my God, so good. There's a little bit of a dusty spiciness to it, not a peppery spice. It's more exotic, maybe like just like spice rack, but maybe touching onto the baking spices like cookie spice, gingerbread cookie spice. The texture, silky. I mean, Alex just hit a home run on this vintage. Great acidity. That acidity kind of leaves a little bit of tartness on the sides of your cheek, which makes you thirsty for more. The tannins are silk. I mean, Pinot Noir, I love good Pinots when they're done right, especially this time of year, because that tannin isn't an aggressive tannin. It's much more soft and pillowy and satiny, silky. That's what this wine comes across as. So I thought perfect time of year to release a great Pinot like this, and especially a price-friendly Pinot at $39 a bottle. We've got most of the 225 cases left. I'm venturing to say we probably have close to 200 cases of this wine left. So it's one we can play with all summer. It's definitely coming onto the tasting room list here shortly, probably in July, and it'll stay on this tasting list through the summer and into the fall, because I think this is a perfect tasting room wine. Who else is drinking it with me? Who else had it over the weekend? Who else wants to share their thoughts, please? Don't all speak at once.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
That's okay, Missy. You're always the one to speak up, and I appreciate that very much.
We did my in-laws love Pinot Noir, and so we brought it over yesterday for Father's Day dinner, and they did ribs in like the sous vide cooker, and then finished them on the grill so they were nice and crispy, and it was great. And then they did skewers. They did chicken skewers with some like onions and peppers, and then they did steak skewers as well. So it was just like a really good barbecue-y kind of dinner with different salads and stuff like that, and it paired perfectly. Just like juicy, silky, exactly what you would want on a hot, a hot barbecue-y type of day. So it was a winner. Nice.
Love it. Yeah, people want to drink red wine. Red wine is, as you guys know, it's the driver of our sales. Let's put it that way. As much as I love rosés and whites, and I do, our client base tends to get excited about red wines. And so in the summertime, Now, we're lucky in San Diego, we don't get the searing heat that a lot of the country is getting right now. But I would imagine if it was 90 degrees, it'd be hard to drink red wine. Pinot Noir is the exception to that rule. Make sure you tell your customers that Pinot Noir like this should be served at about 55 degrees. So if you have a wine fridge and you keep it at, say, 59 or 60 degrees, that works. But as soon as it hits room temperature, especially if your room or your outdoor patio is 90 degrees, you want to keep this cold. So you want to even put it not on ice, but on like one of those chillers that you keep in the freezer that don't have ice in them. They're usually made out of ceramic. Keep this, and this feels beautiful right now. Keep this at that 55 degree temperature, and it's warm enough, air quotes, warm enough, that you're not hiding the flavors. When red wine gets too cold, you really don't taste and get the aromatic intensity that you want in a red wine. So anything into the 40s starts to really hide that. But anything to me above 60 on a hot day with this wine is probably too warm. Right at about 55 to 60, that texture comes across just like silk, and you don't lose any of the aromatics or the flavors of the wine. It is really good. I'm gonna top myself off here. All this talking about it, just it's so good, and nose is so beautiful. Yeah, there's a as it opens in the glass, I'm getting a little bit more of that spice, and I want to say it's something along the lines of oregano. Yeah, and there is some of that cinnamon, molassesy kind of spice to it as well, the cookie spice. But I'm getting more of the spice rack combo spices. Anyway, love this wine, love this vintage, love the fact that we got it down now under $40 a bottle, $39. Guys, we have clients who bought cases of this wine every year at 52. Didn't hesitate. So they would be my first targets. Go back out at 39 for this, and people are going to be absolutely loving it. So, all right.